From this position, we encourage you to explore self-acceptance with a capital S. And trust that which is our source. Understanding that it contains everything without judgment. And just allow. From this place, we wish all those who are suffering peace. And we include ourselves and our own suffering in that wish. And then we feel the gratitude for having the opportunity to be in this quiet, to be present in this moment of expanded awareness. Gently, gently begin to open your eyes while holding your attention inside in this field of awareness. Understanding that we are multidimensional. Our body, again, this is from my friend Mika, our body ice to water to steam. Our awareness ice to water to steam. Our beingness ice to water to steam. past, present, and future, ice to water to steam. Gently hold your attention in both places. Feel how different this is from where we generally begin our day and end our day. We welcome your questions. So happy to be with you today. It's quite beautiful out. How may we serve? Yes.
Can you speak a bit about the best way to be in periods where patterns have fallen away that patterns have not?
So the question is how to be when old patterns have fallen away, but the new patterns have yet to appear. So this is ice to water to steam. Hold your attention in steam as much as you can so that the new patterns that form are in alignment with something beyond your present imagination. Because when something has fallen away, it is a limitation to our imagination that has fallen off. So when we can open to a field beyond our imagination, we hope that creates a magnetic force that attracts something beyond our imagination. Now, this all implies that evolution is a linear process. Because we have linear minds as human beings, this is the only way we can talk about and visualize evolution, but understand that the layers of life behave more like a gyroscope than distinct layers that open like this, which is our linear way of perception. But when we imagine that it's all in motion, around all kinds of centers that are constantly breaking up and reforming, and that there is really chaos and a multi-dimensional interaction at play beyond our imagination always. But there is a kind of greater unifying logic, but it is non-linear and therefore beyond our perception or ability to bring in it's not beyond our perception, but it is beyond our ability to reduce it to three-dimensional language. And we'll tell you that because of the way Rebecca is put together, it is her tendency to be idealistic with her imagination, a bit romantic and dreamy with her interpretation. It's built into the system. And part of this is the understanding that there is always polarity, and that if we focus on that which we deem to be positive, that we can actually create magnetism that attracts that. And this is what the laws of attraction are made of. But the reason they don't work in a linear way is because they're nonlinear, which is really a cop-out, but it's the truth. Because of course, if it was linear, we'd all be doing it. But we can say that there are basic principles to be paid attention to. And the primary one is cooperation. The only way we can really move the human collective is by encouraging flow, which looks like cooperation. For example, in the issue of gender, cooperation. Not dominance of one or the other, but walking hand in hand. And the guaranteed path is taking pleasure in the happiness of the other. When we learn to appreciate the joy in the faces of the people we love, rather than seeking domination or any kind of control. Then we know that we'll begin to learn. That's all we really know. is that there are certain things that we can add to our matrix of belief and begin to experiment with how they inform our greater life. This doesn't mean that we turn ourselves into a victim or a martyr, but there is this concept of selfless service that we can begin to experiment and see what that means in our own lives and where the balance points are. Because the fundamental state is equanimity, where all parts are welcome. So what we're outlining, Andrew, in answer to your question, is a field of allowing yourself to be informed about how to serve bigger now that the limitation has fallen away. And for you, because selfless service is natural to you, you have to be sure that you don't leave yourself out of the equation. Because then there's an imbalance that at some point doesn't serve you.
Sounds like trust is a major part of
Yes, but then the question is trust in what?
this. So,
This will also sound like a cop-out, but the trust language fails because the only word we have is love. And, you know, it means so many things in it just covers everything from hormonal drive to completely selfless service. And really, it's trust that the source of everything that is the highest best for the whole. And that in alignment with that, we will experience everything that is meant for us to be experienced in this life with some degree of equanimity. That means the understanding that the things that appear as challenges we agreed to for our own benefit, so that pain is not something that any of us get to avoid, but with the understanding that that pain is information. Agreed to beforehand. which takes the suffering out of the pain, the feeling that we are somehow victimized or martyred. Instead, we take it as a cost of living field of information. Unavoidable, undeniable, with the understanding, and we can only give you an example from Rebecca's life. When she was 29, her mother suicided. This was the most profound experience she had ever had dropped in her life. And it was so beyond expectation, denial, and really challenged every fundamental matrix of belief in her being. And in accepting that challenge, she sat down on a cushion and said, "I'm not getting up till I understand this." That process continues. In a couple of weeks, it will have continued for 3 decades. And here we are. Death is undeniable. Nobody gets out of here alive. Some things are too painful to live through. That was the situation of her mother. And it was only going to get worse. This can be seen from an astrological perspective. This is a microcosm view. But it only makes sense in the context of evolution. This pain was not meant to turn her into a victim. Although in the stages of evolution in dealing with pain and loss, one does have those emotions. They are undeniable and completely acceptable. But if we allow them to be our limitation, then the love, which is the source of the grief, cannot come to the surface to be appreciated. Grief, love, a glove on right side up, pulled off inside out. These both exist in the same time and same place when a loved one dies. And we go back and forth in our experience of them. these feelings. And yet, this is a profound experience that became the source of evolution. Was it a gift or a curse? We always get to decide. We always have a choice. And in some moments it's a gift, and in some moments it feels like a curse. This is life. Profound love. Profound pain. Suffering? Maybe not so much. Some for sure, in the lack of understanding and the quest for knowing deeper. We all have these experiences. Some have drama and trauma. This is the nature of being human and living. All parts are welcome. And chaos is part of the whole picture. We could talk about random as that chaos. But underlying it all is that which we trust. And it is from this cultivation of trust, day after day, as we go into the deepest part of ourself and cultivate that trust with devotion, we'll just say devotion, because devotion itself contains within it a kind of inspiration and idealism. And it is this that we bring to our sense of allowing. Understanding that our birth is the great forgetting. And our death is the reunification. And that both are the same. The only thing that's different is the direction of the flow. Both are sacred, profoundly sacred experiences. They are beyond words, the experience of birth and death. We welcome your questions. More, Andrew? That Wally. Oops. Sorry.
That's okay. Good morning.
Good morning. How are things in Hawaii?
Beautiful. um, Thank you. It's been very, very powerful. Would you say more about the gyroscope image that you used?
Well, it's an attempt to describe the complexity of the dynamism of the multiverse. Again, it's a reductionist description and linear, but it has motion and multidimensionality to it in a certain way, although still linear. And it prods our imagination to go a little bit more dimensional. So if you take a gyroscope and you imagine that it is multidimensional, we don't have a word for what that looks like, but it can give us a different image than if we take a series of circles and just put them out in 3 dimensions, and then we just have a whole bunch of spheres. But if we have each sphere in motion with all kinds of parts moving at the same time, that at least gives us a little bigger, broader idea. And then if you imagine that there are blips and blebs everywhere, but there's some we're out of language. We don't have any capacity for that in language, but in our nonlinear beingness, which is the part that we are trying to cultivate in ourselves, we go beyond the language. And when we hit those parts of ourselves that are beyond language and we ask to be informed, then we have to understand that the information can't be linear. Because we are asking to be informed about the nonlinear. And then we have entered the world of steam, the nonlinear world beyond 3-dimensional reality, which we can describe as wind and steam. And there is a certain internal perception. And our meridians are an example in the physical body of the wind, serving our health, balance. And of course, we can cultivate our awareness of these channels and pathways. Which are well described in three-dimensional reality in Chinese medicine. And it was because of the respect for the body, the respect for the 3D body, that the Chinese refused to cut it open to try to discover how it worked. And instead used their felt awareness to understand the ebb and flow in the channels, and developed a whole system of understanding the health in the body. How may we serve further? We're not so grounded this morning. Wally.
When we ask to be informed, it sounds like what's not going to happen is some kind of understanding, something we can make sense of in a linear way. And since
Well, that's not necessarily true. It depends on what we're asking to be informed. Sometimes we just need a linear direction. And different things are appropriate at different times in our life. There are stages of life. And yet, here we are, Rebecca in the third stage of life, being asked to study something that takes a lifetime to master. So it's not linear. But astrology is helpful in some ways about this, because you can understand from astrology what the intention of a particular cycle in one's life how to be in alignment with that. And that can be helpful. And then there's a whole Vedic understanding that our culture doesn't have. And so it's important, since we're talking about astrology, we'll talk about the Vedic understanding a bit, because there is this idea that there are 4 yugas or stages that humanity goes through in cycles that last thousands and thousands of years. The Sat Yuga, the Tret Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. And each of these, the Sat Yuga is the age of enlightenment, which is considered to be harmonious, fifth dimensional living. And then the one below that, called the Tret Yoga, where some of that is lost and the quality of human interaction is some less. And then there's Dwapara Yuga, which is less than that. And then Kali Yuga, which is no understanding of collective unity and consciousness. And that humanity has been going through these cycles for who knows how long. Because as each cycle gets less harmonious, the history is lost. The understanding is lost of what came before. And so from the Kali Yuga, it begins to rise again. And each time it arises, we assume in a different way or the same. We don't know. We only know what we're in when we're in it as individual human beings. But supposedly, astrology was written down in the Sat Yuga because they were able to see the 4 dimensions, as it were, of human experience. They were able to see from the whole the future. And so in the Sat Yuga, people just know things by being told once, because there is no obstruction to memory or knowledge and information. dissemination of wisdom. And so in that context, oral tradition makes sense because it's not forgotten immediately. And so the idea that it would be forgotten is not even present. Somehow we have the Rig Veda and Atharva Veda, which has, not sure we're pronouncing that right, but that's where astrology is first mentioned. Then we have to say that there is in the mythology a curse. Shiva went to the astrologers for information at one point, and he intuited that they were not telling him the entire truth. And so he put a curse on astrologers that they would all disagree forever. And so there is a lot of disagreement in the field. So we're just talking about it because Rebecca's studying it so much that it's on her mind. And it's a valuable tool, but it shows trends and possibilities, not exact realities. And so, and this is because it's the same reason that we, Anasa, don't make predictions, because human beings have free will. And that what that really means is that human beings have the freedom to be impulsive. And that changes every equation. And since equations are by necessity up to a certain point linear, we are again in the dimension of linear language. However, mathematics and a lot of our science, as it has named the quantum world, is beyond three-dimensional reality. Once you get to 0 equals 1, and that an electron is both a particle and a wave, and that time is relative, and the difference between time, space, and matter is a matter of perspective, then this is entering higher dimensional reality. But even saying these words, again, demotes it. Demote's not the right word. It's too loaded with emotion. It makes it other than multidimensional. But as human beings, we can look to animals. You know, animals never lose their connection, their trust, unless they've been seriously abused. Their awareness of their connection with the whole. Animals are channels of love, especially our pets. They are channels that bring pure, raw love. mostly unsophisticated, but in a way that's part of the beauty. And that's what behaving in alignment is. Dogs, for the most part, live to love. Cats in their own way. Horses in their own way. But that natural connection, that fundamental awareness of connection, for the most part, animals don't have identity crises unless they're abused in some way. So we've wandered all over the place. I hope it's helpful. How may we serve further? So asking to be informed means you open your mind. And the information you're given needs to be treated as sacred communication. So the asking is a sacred act. How may we serve further? We find this quite gratifying because our intention is to acquaint you with dimensional reality beyond your normal experience. So we see and are participating in your experience of ever expanding unity with great joy. This is our purpose in being here. We point with the language, but we show with the energy itself. This is the teaching. And ultimately, the trust is that the energy itself is your teacher. And knowing that, how can you possibly be separate? And yet it is this illusion of separation that drives us ever deeper into ourselves in our quest for self-discovery. And our examination of our matrix of belief, which another word for is self-inquiry. Like, why am I so agitated in this moment? So that isn't happening for any of us right now. It is a common experience in our daily life. And an important question to ask when that happens, because that's how we become informed about our deeper motivations and aggravations that in bringing those to harmony, we release ourselves, ice to water, water to steam. This is how we release ourselves from these patterns, which are holding us to a rigid view of three-dimensional reality, which is no longer appropriate as we begin to enter multi-dimensional evolutionary process. And much as Rebecca would like all evolutionary process to understand it as the highest best. And yes, it is the highest best. But ice to water, water to steam is a description of change of state. And so there is birth and death in all of these processes. And remember, we said at the beginning, birth and death are the same. They're just going in different directions. So we're pulling some of the potential for the New Age Pollyanna attitude. We're pulling some of that back. Because inner work doesn't need that to be inspiring, because there is a way in which we experience that we know it's false, that anything that contains the whole contains the whole. And the whole is a blend of everything that is. And that words like equanimity, detachment, and enlightenment it's really the ability to sit in ice water and steam all in the same moment. So right on cue, time for meditation. Unless there's something that you really want to ask before. We always love your questions. Okay, into the depths we go. So we're just going to broadcast now. And you are welcome to receive in whatever way feels appropriate to you. Somebody has a question?
I was going to ask a question.
Oh, Joyce, please ask a question. So sorry I said your name. We will edit it out of the
That's
film.
all right. I am just trying to find some peace around an old relationship that's kind of blowing up. And so I'm trying to ask for some wisdom and understanding how to move forward when the person you lived with doesn't seem like the same person anymore.
So we're going to give you the advice of what to do when communication is stalled.
Okay.
So the thing to do is to sit with yourself and visualize the highest best that's possible. From your perspective. And then you sit with the highest best from their perspective. And then you make a 3-sentence description of what you see as the highest best for both. Then you go to an Anasa temple and you invite the other person to come to that Anasa temple, the other person in their highest best, to come to that Anasa temple. This is an ethereal process where you speak of the highest to the other You do not speak of this in the material world to anyone, but it stops the fight in you, because there is no longer the goal of whatever has been happening, but it becomes, how do we make this the highest best for everybody? It just changes the perception of the field and the level of the conversation. And so you stop communicating in the material world for a bit, and you just have this conversation. You deliver your message. You don't ask for any response. You just allow the other person to leave having received your message. And you go about your business and watch the situation change. And you may do this practice every single day, multiple times a day when things are volatile. But you are constantly recalibrating yourself to the highest possibility you can imagine for the whole. And it will provide you with a tool that automatically examines your motivations and the other person's. And so you have a clearer perspective about what's happening in yourself. And the whole thing, instead of being about disharmony, becomes about how do we find the flow in the highest possible. We are still broadcasting. Nothing has been lost. Truly valuable question. We all have moments, short and long, in this kind of situation.
And and when presented with information from that person that doesn't fit, do I just bring that into the temple and just sit with it?
Well, the first thing you do with information that's disharmonious is you take it inside yourself and look honestly for truth in it. There's generally some truth in the basis of all insanity, which is what happens to people when a relationship is disintegrating. We all go insane in certain ways for parts of these situations. It's just the nature of what it is. Tends not to bring out the best in us. And so this attempt to feel for our own highest and the highest for the whole can bring us to some self-honesty that is helpful. And understand that we are both victim and martyr all the time and passing it back and forth in these conversations, and that we want to elevate the level of the communication to reestablish flow in whatever way is appropriate to the evolving circumstances. But instead of trying to destroy each other, we are trying to build something. And in redirecting that flow in ourselves, it kind of sets a groundwork for a different conversation that's less about destruction and more about evolution. Does that make sense?
And by evolution, you mean growth and understanding and perhaps even inner
Yes.
wisdom.
Growth, understanding, which is essentially boils down to the word flow. You know, instead of and you truly, truly look for the highest best. These things get so complicated. So complicated. And there's always pain for everybody. We see it. But it helps to hold yourself to certain levels of respect for the other. Because if that respect wasn't there, you wouldn't have shared so much in the first place. And so you pull yourself back to that respect. And you try to recreate flow with the highest best for everybody. So you're thinking about that and not just reacting. So often these things get, you know, you did this to me, I did that to you, you did this to me. You know, there's this whole destructive back and forth that tends to happen as things are disintegrating. So if you pull yourself back to the respect and the admiration, even that drew you together in the first place, and look for the highest best, pull yourself out of the degradation that we tend to do to each other, the diminishing, which is, you know, the victim betrayal. All of these things get energized in us. And so we want to heal ourselves as we go, as best we can, and have a different perspective. Like, where is the highest to be found in this situation? And in that contemplation, you come up with very simple things that you take to the Inasa temple to deliver, so that it's not about conquest or uh, you know, all the destructive words that we can use for what happens when relationships dissolve. And these things are all death and rebirth experiences. And so, you know, there is grief. And the understanding that grief is love turned inside out. And then that gives a context for reestablishing flow. Does that make sense? And all parts are welcome. Doesn't mean that you deny the horrible feelings. Because those happen too. But you attempt to re-establish in yourself some view of the highest possibility and serving that. Which doesn't mean denying any of the reality. But instead of a fight, it can be a discovery process of what is still possible. And it means that there is context for continued flow no matter what happens, because the love is real and that love deserves respect and nurturing, even though the context is being redefined.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't have to be complete destruction.
Mm.
It's better if it's not.
Mhm.
It's better if it's new understanding
Mhm.
and a different dimension of respect, allowing for change.
Mhm.
We hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
So we're at our time. We've loved being with you. This is so valuable for us to be with you and answer your questions and share in the beauty of life itself, which contains everything, from the highest joy and bliss to suicidal depression. And we all have it. We all have all of it. At some point or another, this is life. And none of it is separate from divinity. None of it. It's all part of the whole, and all parts are welcome. And we hold to the highest best because it's the pragmatic thing to do. It's the only thing that works for everybody all the time. So with that, we're going to stop. So much love, so much gratitude. Till next week. Unless you feel like meditating Wednesday night, we'll be there. Bye for now.